The auction yard smelled of dust and sweat. Under the blazing noon sun, people gathered to watch as women were sold off like cattle. Among them stood a woman named Clara, tall, broad-shouldered, and stronger than most men there. The crowd jeered, whispering cruel things about her size. The auctioneer shouted, "Too big for a wife, but good for work." The laughter stung worse than a whip. Clara kept her chin high, though tears burned her eyes. She had been traded before, but this time it felt final, her spirit ready to shatter under the mockery of strangers. The sheriff leaned lazily against his post, ignoring the cruelty. To him, it was just another day of trade and coin. Men spat tobacco, measuring Clara like a mule. One old rancher offered $5. Another laughed and said she wasn't worth the food she'd eat. The auctioneer barked louder, his voice echoing through the crowd. "Who'll take this big one off our hands?" Clara's hands trembled, but she didn't move. She'd learned long ago that fighting only made things worse. Somewhere deep inside, she prayed someone, anyone, might see her worth beyond her size. Far down the road, a cowboy named Eli Boone rode into town. His horse was weary, his hat tilted low to hide his tired eyes. He wasn't looking for trouble, just a meal and a bit of shade. But as he reached the square, the noise caught his attention. When he saw Clara standing there, something twisted in his chest. She looked more human than anyone in that crowd, proud even as they tried to break her. He dismounted slowly, eyes narrowing at the auctioneer's grin. "What's the price on her?" Eli asked quietly, voice like gravel and thunder. The crowd went silent for a moment. The auctioneer smirked, sensing easy money. "You sure, cowboy? She's not a lady, she's labor." Eli's gaze sharpened. "I didn't ask what she is. I asked the price." The man hesitated, then named a ridiculous figure. Eli didn't flinch. He pulled out a leather pouch and dropped it at the man's feet. The silver coins clattered loud against the silence. "She comes with me," he said. Clara looked up, her breath catching. No one had ever spoken for her like that, calm, certain, and without shame. The laughter died in the crowd. As the auctioneer cut the rope binding her wrists, Clara staggered. Her muscles ached from days of travel and hunger. Eli stepped forward and caught her by the arm before she fell. His touch was gentle, steady. "You're all right," he murmured. "Let's get you out of here." The people watched, whispering again, but this time their voices held confusion instead of cruelty. Eli didn't care. He led her through the dusty street to his horse. Clara hesitated, too weak to climb. Without a word, he lifted her easily, settling her in the saddle. "Hold on," he said, "we're going home." They rode until the sun bled into the horizon. The plains stretched wide and endless, wind whipping through Clara's tangled hair. She didn't speak for hours, afraid the spell would break if she asked why he'd helped her. Finally, Eli broke the silence. "You got a name?" "Clara," she whispered. "No last name," he nodded. "Name's Eli Boone. You'll have a roof and food at my place. No one will bother you there." She blinked hard, unsure if she'd heard him right. No one had ever offered her kindness without expecting something in return. "Why?" she asked. "Because no one else would." When they reached his ranch, the stars were already bright. It was small, a single cabin, a barn, and miles of quiet land. Eli helped her down and handed her a blanket. "You can sleep inside. You're safe here." The word safe felt strange, almost foreign. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and coffee. He gave her stew, water, and a seat by the fire. Clara ate slowly, hands shaking. Eli didn't press her for talk. He simply sat across the room, polishing his old revolver. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Over the next few days, Clara found strength returning to her limbs. She helped in the barn, fed the horses, and mended torn reins. Eli watched quietly, never treating her as less. He noticed her strong arms lifting hay bales with ease, the calm patience she showed with the animals. The horses trusted her fast. One morning, Eli said, "You've got a good way with them." She smiled shyly. "Guess we understand each other." For the first time in years, Clara laughed. Not out of mockery or defense, but from something real. And Eli couldn't help but smile too. The nearby townsfolk began to talk. "That Boone fella's taken in that big woman," they'd whisper at the saloon. Some called her a servant, others worse, but Eli ignored them all. One evening, when a group of men rode by to mock her, he stood on the porch with his rifle. "You can ride on," he told them flatly, "or you can stay and dig your own graves." They left without another word. Clara watched from the window, tears stinging her eyes. No one had ever defended her like that. In that moment, something inside her began to heal. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch began to feel alive again. Clara cooked, laughed, and sang softly while working. Eli started sleeping better, eating more. The loneliness that had haunted the cabin for years started to fade. One afternoon, while mending a fence, Eli said quietly, "You belong here, Clara." She froze, the wind tugging at her hair. "You don't mean that." "I do," he replied. "This place ain't been right till you came." Her heart thudded, unsure if she deserved such words. But when she looked at him, she saw no pity, only truth. One stormy night, lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled across the plains. The cattle panicked, breaking through the corral. Without hesitation, Clara ran into the rain, shouting and swinging the gate closed. Eli followed, mud splattering his face. Together they fought the wind and rain, their clothes soaked, their hands raw. When it was done, both stood gasping in the dark, drenched and trembling. Eli laughed breathlessly. "You're tougher than half the men I've ever known." Clara smiled through the rain. "Guess I finally found somewhere I fit." The words hung between them like a promise. Weeks later, Clara's laughter filled the small cabin. She had built her own place in the world, not because someone gave it, but because she earned it. Eli couldn't remember what the ranch had felt like before her. One evening, he found her sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "Not anymore. No one ever looked at me the way you do." He smiled faintly. "Then I reckon you'll stay." She nodded, and for the first time, peace settled over both their hearts. Months passed. The ranch thrived. Clara grew strong, not just in body, but in spirit. The neighbors stopped whispering when they saw how Eli treated her, as an equal, as family. One afternoon, he handed her a small wooden box. Inside lay a silver ring, simple but beautiful. "It ain't much," he said, voice rough. "But I figure the woman who saved my ranch and my soul deserves more than words." Clara's breath caught. "Eli," he smiled. "Marry me, Clara Boone." She nodded through tears, and when he kissed her, the world seemed to stand still. The wedding was small, just them, the preacher from town, and the wind. The sun burned gold on the horizon, painting everything in light. Eli wore his best hat, and Clara's dress was one she'd sewn herself. When the preacher asked if he'd take her, Eli said, "I already have." Laughter rippled through the air, and Clara's tears fell freely. She had once been sold like cattle, called names that broke her heart, but now she was wanted, chosen, loved. And in that quiet little corner of the Wild West, she finally found her forever. Years later, travelers would pass through Boone Ranch and speak of the woman who ran it, with more strength and kindness than any man around. They'd say she was built like a storm, but had a heart softer than spring rain. And every evening she'd sit with Eli on the porch, his arm around her, both watching the horizon fade into gold. For a woman once sold for being too big, Clara Boone became a legend. Proof that love isn't about beauty or size, but about seeing someone the way no one else ever dared to.